This podcast episode of RealAg Radio is brought to you by Authority Strike Herbicide from FMC. With just one application, Authority Strike gives you a strong start with a powerful one-pass burn-off and keeps working later with extended weed control. Stop by your local retailer or visit ag.fmc.com/ca to learn more.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your work day. It's great to have you here today. Hey, also big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. You know, I was reviewing some of the podcast data with Kelvin and Lindsay yesterday. Ooh, boy, we continue to grow. Thank you. You are sharing RealAg Radio podcast with your friends, your family, your peers, your neighbors. And we greatly appreciate that. Keep those referrals coming. The more the merrier, everybody. Thank you for being a part of the RealAg community. I'm broadcasting today from Calgary, Alberta, from a hotel room out by the airport. My travels continue. Yes, they do continue. Tonight, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to be out in Crossfield, Alberta. After dinner speaker at a cow-calf production event. It is Veterinary Agri-Health Services out of Crossfield, out of Rocky View, I should say. That's going to be having me be the after-dinner speaker. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of ranching issues, and I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to talk about trade. We're going to talk about geopolitics. We're going to talk about consumer demand. We're going to cover it all, and I'm looking for. I love the after-dinner speech because it's very interactive. People maybe had one or two cold ones. They loosen up. They got some questions, and I am looking so forward to it. And then Wednesday night, I'm going to be in Brandon, Manitoba. I'm going to be speaking at a Cargill Market Sense customer event, which I'm looking forward to as well. Also doing after dinner there too. So I got 2 after dinner speeches this week. It is going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. Really looking forward to being in Brandon. And the weather looks a little bit better than it did the last couple of weeks, so that's going to be good. So if you're going to be at either of those events here today or tomorrow, please say hello and say, hey, I listen to RealAg Radio and love to chat with you and talk and catch up and do all those sorts of things. And then Friday, heading to Denver. It is Commodity Classic. Yes, I was in Denver, Colorado on this past weekend, down in Pueblo. It's 2 hours south of the city, watching my youngest son play college baseball for the Bismarck State team, and they went 1-3 against a tough McCook Community College team, but it was a lot of fun. The weather was beautiful. It was like 65, 70 degrees. I will take it. Also, and the reason I'm going to Denver is Commodity Classic. It starts on Sunday. Weird start date. It just kind of takes away the weekend, to be honest with you, because Saturday's kind of prep. Already got some meetings planned on Saturday as everybody comes to town. Going to take in some of the committee meetings as well. And then Sunday, Commodity Classic officially starts. And we'll be doing some interviews and getting ready for all the different people we have to talk to and all the different, there's a lot of stuff to chat about next week at Commodity Classic. And then, of course, we'll be in full swing on Monday. So then the crops convention happens in the middle of the next week. So you can see how the week just sort of like, this is like it just sort of wraps in a week like this, but I'm looking forward to it. It's one of the advantages we have, being able to go coast to coast, country to country, Canada, the U.S., and bring in all those pieces of inputs and those perspectives to you here on RealAg Radio. Now, today on the program, we're going to hear from Peter Wee P. Johnson. He wasn't on Agronomic Monday yesterday, but he'll join me here today. We've also got a product spotlight with Kris Kinnaird. He is going to be here to talk about some of the things going on at Farmer's Edge. And then we're going to hear from Scott Shearer from Ohio State University. He talked to Kelvin at Crop Connect about the 3 places to consider tracks instead of tires. That's a controversial topic, tracks versus tires. Not just on the tractor, but also on some of the things we pull behind the tractor, like grain carts. Should you have tracks or tires, and in what situations? Also, we're going to hear from Tom Wolf of Agrimetrix. He's going to provide an update on spray drones as well. Something that people talk about a lot, but is it as much of a reality as we expected? Maybe it's right on pace. Is it ahead of pace? Tom is one of the world's really renowned experts when it comes to spraying technology and spray applications. So he's right on top of this drone thing. So he's going to provide an update here today as well. And we may have some time in the bonus segment today for some top ag news stories of the day. Now, if you have any feedback on today's program, we would love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. Make sure you give us a follow on Instagram. Real Agriculture on Instagram. Make sure you do that. You can also call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Now, one of the things that I find very fascinating is Canada, is the Canadian political scene. We had the French language debate for the Liberal leadership race last night. Of course, two frontrunners, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland, battling out in French language. And what's really fascinating here is Carney looks to be the favorite, former head of the Bank of Canada, Bank of England, and now trying to find a place as the Prime Minister of Canada. He does not have a seat in Parliament, which I'm sure they will fix, and he will run for a seat. That not unusual. This happened in Alberta. Danielle Smith, she had to find a seat, and she ran. So not uncommon. Some people are making a big deal about this. It's not that uncommon. I don't find it that uncommon at all, or at least it doesn't seem. Not a bother. Also, a lot of people trying to make this about he's being appointed. Now, very different than what happened with the Democrats in the U.S. with Kamala Harris. That was an appointment. That was a coronation as the person that would run against, at that time, candidate Donald Trump. This is different. This is actually a Liberal leadership race. So I see it differently. What is very fascinating to me is the realities of, there are multiple polls showing this is a neck and neck race. Neck and neck. Carney versus Poilievre. The Conservatives got some work to do. Atlantic Canada, Ontario, they are flipping back to Liberals. That 25-point lead the Conservatives had, she gone. And they're going to have to do some work. We'll be following up on that here in the coming weeks. Let's take a break. When we come back, we've got Peter W.P. Johnson right after this. It's now time for a Park Spotlight, joined by the senior agronomist with Koch Agronomic Services, Bryce Geisel. Bryce, a lot of growers, they're concerned about where the profit margins are. How can we maximize the ROI of the nitrogen investment they're making on their farms?
A big return on that investment is to keep more of that nitrogen applied in the field, being available for your crops. So unless you're putting that nitrogen 3 inches down where it will be well protected, nitrogen stabilizer might be a fit to help reduce those nitrogen losses, though kind of that leaching, denitrification, volatilization losses. I think one of the big things too is making sure that you're using the right kind of stabilizer for your application. There's going to be needs that you should be just utilizing a urease inhibitor like Anvil, other applications where you're using just a nitrification inhibitor like Centuro, and there's going to be other times where you're going to need both those types of inhibitors because you're trying to protect from all 3 forms of losses. So a product like Super U or Tribune are going to be great additions to be able to use those. So there's a lot to go through, but you can definitely go to our website, kochagronomicservices.ca, and you can get all that information.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Let's start off this Tuesday show by talking to Peter W.P. Johnson. Pete, how are we doing?
Hey, I'm great. How about yourself, Shaun?
Hey, pretty good.
It's a glorious day here in Ontario. The temperature is decent. The snow is melting. We even have some sunshine, which has been sorely missing in February, by God. So a nice day.
Indeed, my friend. Indeed. Hey, Pete, I want to tell you about something before we get started here. And I'm specifically talking to all of our Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and northern Minnesota growers. The new seed omega-3 canola production system can help you unlock a guaranteed path to market with attractive premium opportunities, first-in-class agronomy support, and free on-farm pickup after harvest. To learn more, visit omega3canola.com. Great year to grow canola. I love that free on-farm pickup. That just seems like a key feature of that omega-3 system. So make sure you go to omega3canola.com. Pete, where in the world are you today?
So I'm in Mount Bridges, today at the Caradoc Community Center. It is the Middlesex Soil and Crop Improvement Association Crops Update. So just having a bunch of fun trying to stir the pot with growers.
You stir the pot.
No, not me. Of course not. I would never do that, Shaun.
What are you stirring the pot on today specifically? You're just trying to get them to maybe expand their horizons, thinking about things agronomically, or what are you doing?
So I always, at this meeting, they call it wheat Pete in the bullpen, or as Ken Nixon would like to say, BS with Dr. BS. So,
okay.
So yeah, basically questions growers have, and I do my best to answer them or at least have an opinion.
Yeah. Hey, you're mentioning the weather, and after 2-3 weeks of really brutal cold weather, feels like I'm in Calgary here today. And to be honest, when I landed yesterday afternoon, it pretty nice for the end of February. Weather is significantly improved.
Yeah, it feels like spring is coming. And it's kind of interesting, Shaun, on my last episode of The Word, I talked about being in my office and the sun was coming through the window and how much power that sun had. Like, it was hot. That wasn't hot temperature-wise inside the house. But with the sun coming through, we're getting to that time of year where the sun really is starting to have more power. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize about that is that in the last 30 years, the photosynthetically active radiation in the sunshine is about 27% brighter than it was 30 years ago or in that range. And that's because we've taken a lot of the particulate matter out of the air. Sulfur we need now as a fertilizer. It used to be in the air, and that sulfur would intercept some of the sunshine or deflect it, and so you wouldn't get as much active radiation. Now, that sun, if you're down at the equator, it's maybe not a good thing in terms of how much power that sun has, but sitting in Ontario on the 25th of March today, right? 25th of March, the sun having some power is quite nice.
It's February, Pete. We're the 25th of February.
Sorry, February, not March, right? Getting close to March, 25th of February. Thank you, Mr. Haney.
Man, if it's the 25th of March, I've got some planning to do. I am not ready for spring. I am really not ready for spring. Don't fast forward on me, Pete. Do not fast forward on me.
Well, but I think that's a good point, right? Because last night on the Agronomists, ultra early seeding, Brian Barris, Tyler McBlain, just awesome session. And one of the questions in the chat was, so what do you have to do differently on your farm or with your equipment? And the answer was that we don't do anything different other than we basically have to have the drill ready and the seed in the shed on about the 1st of February. Brian Barrett has planted as early as February the 9th. Tyler McBlain, I think he said as early as February the 24th, something like that. So ultra early seeding, you got to be ready. So if you're not ready, Shaun, you better get moving, man.
Yeah, you know what? The weather was beautiful enough here yesterday. You probably could have put some seed in the ground here in the Calgary area. I was in Colorado on the weekend. It was beautiful 70 degrees on Sunday. That's forget about early seeding. That just feels like it's spring. Period. But hey, last week we had Drew Lerner on the show. And one of the concerning things that Drew had to say, Pete, is he's expecting a potentially later, colder spring for Central and Eastern Canada. And
so that is concerning for sure. But interestingly enough, in Brian's work out of Lethbridge and out of Alberta, he has yet to have a failure with this ultra early seeding, right? So despite the fact that Drew might be predicting some cooler temperatures out there, if you get the chance to put that crop in the ground early, your spring cereal crop, not your canola, not your lentils, not your soybeans, but wheat, barley, oats, get the stuff in the ground. Even durum wheat. Brian's Ryan's research says durum wheat works. In 24, he had 90 bushel durum wheat seeded ultra early.
Wow.
And that's to me, that's incredible, man.
Well, but where it could play a role though is when we get started with our corn and soybean planting.
100%. For the crops that we can't seed ultra early, that weather forecast is a bit of a concern. And, we are pushing more and more to longer day hybrids in corn, longer soybean maturities if we're not going to wheat. And that's because, the seasons have been getting longer. There's no question about that. Most areas in North America have about 3 weeks now longer frost-free season than they had 50 years ago. But a spring like this, the lakes here in Ontario have more ice cover than they've had for a long time. And that means that it'll take a little bit longer for them to moderate, like they'll keep the temperature a bit lower. Doesn't mean a late spring. It just means that you need higher temperatures to get that 10 degrees Celsius that soybeans and corn really want. So yeah, it's a concern, but you deal with it when it comes, man.
Yeah, but the other part of it too is Drew and a few other people we've talked. Matt Makins from Makins Weather's another one. Actually, Matt thinks that you look at the Western Canadian forecast. He is concerned about the same kind of sort of weather shutoff in June like we saw last year, which really robbed us of the potential yield that we had. And if that's the same kind of year we're setting up for, if we have decent conditions at the front end and we're concerned about the backside, that pushes us, and especially on some of these cereals, get it in as early as possible so that we're getting to maturity faster, so we're not so reliant on that back end moisture come late July and early August.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just moisture, Shaun. It's also temperature,
heat.
Right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, right.
It's moisture. It's both moisture and heat. If I can get it in early, and again, Brian showed that last night, where you basically move that grain fill period from July and August can be desperately hot and dry. You move that to June and July. July can still be hot, but June typically, we're cooler. We give that crop more chance to use the moisture to grow and not in as big a deficit if the weather gurus are correct and we run into those drought conditions.
Yeah, well, and last week at Top Producer Summit, definitely hearing concerns about some of the dryness in parts of the Midwest. That is really that thought narrative is very much alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I talked to a grower in Alberta, said that he feels he's in the 5th year of a drought right now. He still doesn't have enough moisture over the winter and last fall. So yeah, drought. Lack of moisture is always a big concern in Western Canada. It doesn't look like a lot of places are starting off any more moisture than we would like them to have. Yeah.
Whether it's Western Canada, whether it's the U.S. Midwest, there's definitely some dryness concerns. So Mother Nature, come on, cooperate. Soil biology, that's something that I know you're talking at the Middlesex group there today. It's definitely going to come up from the growers. What are some of the things you've been looking at from a soil biology standpoint?
Yeah, soil biology is the amount we're learning on soil biology, Shaun. It just excites me. And so at the Eastern Ontario Crop Conference, part of the Ontario Ag Conference, Corrine Ketterings from Cornell University spoke, and it was on manure. And we always struggle with manure to know how much nitrogen credit to give it. Like, it just seems to be such a nebulous thing to get your brain around. Her data clearly shows that if I apply manure once, and I haven't applied manure for 10 years, that the biology in the soil won't be there to work on that manure, to break it down, to give me the release out of the nitrogen that I would expect. And that if I'm a regular manure user and I add more manure, that there's biology, it may be dormant, but it comes to life really quickly and it makes that nitrogen more available. So she's actually working on a test that you would do basically at the same time as you would do a pre-hydrate nitrate test, so kind of that V6 to V8 stage of corn, and looking at the level of soil biology, how active it is, and using that as a predictor for how much manure and nitrogen you can count on for the corn crop. And like that goes right hand in hand with the stuff that Brian Arnell talked about. He's from Oklahoma State University, and he talked about it at the Southwest Ag Conference. But if you're in a rotation, a corn, soybean, wheat rotation, or whatever, that the biology almost learns that. If you're regularly corn, soybeans, wheat, and when you plant the wheat, the biology that works well with the wheat crop is ready to go. It isn't active till you plant the wheat, but it just takes off and it helps that wheat crop. Similarly, when you plant corn. And if you don't follow a regular rotation, you kind of confuse the biology, and that isn't quite as beneficial. And if you only use one, if you're continuous corn, that's really bad for the biology because it just doesn't get that chance for a rest. And anyway, it's just like this whole concept of the biology adapting and being prepared to take off is a new concept totally to me, and I just find it phenomenally interesting.
But is it that new? Like, this is why some people are so passionate about worm counts in their soil. There's a lot of companies that are creating additive products to spark, enhance, enable that soil biology to really do its magic. Is it that new?
Oh, yeah, it's new. And I'll tell you why, Shaun. The companies that are working on that biology, they're trying to find one strain that works on corn, soybeans, and wheat, or a group of strains together. And they're trying to put them in there. They're very small quantities, and those very small quantities have to trump what's already in the soil. So there's lots of competition. This concept of the biology being there and primed and laying ready to rumble, that's a new concept. That, like, it just, to me at least, that's a new concept, man.
Hey, makes sense. Hey, maximize productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. MNP Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. Visit mmp.ca today to learn more. Pete, I'll let you get to the Middlesex group. Have yourself a great day. And it was great chatting with you on this Tuesday. And hey, by the way, Pete crossed 500 episodes of Wheat Pete's Word. Pete, how did we not have a party? Congratulations.
Oh, well, I had a party, Shaun. You just didn't show up.
You didn't invite me.
Oh, I'm pretty sure I made it well known that it was episode 500. No, episode 500, and we're on our way to 1,000, Shaun. That's the hope.
Great stuff. Well, Wheat Pete's Word, the new episode drops every single Wednesday. You can get Wheat Pete's Word wherever you get your podcasts. You can also go to realagriculture.com/podcast to find Wheat Pete's Word and the entire list of all the different shows that we are creating on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. Pete, have yourself a great week.
Yeah, you as well, Shaun. I hope you get home sometime soon.
No, not for a while. Not for a while. Hey, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we got a product spotlight coming up with Farmer's Edge right after this. Every farmer defines success differently, and every farm has its own unique challenges. Corteva Biologicals is partnering with Canadian farmers for their success, offering unique solutions that improve and protect crops from start to finish, based on each field's needs. Using proven, predictable solutions across all crop stages, Corteva Biologicals helps build healthy, productive, and profitable farms. Corteva Biologicals, we're growing together. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube
or visit RealAgriculture.com, the Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
Every year, humic loss makes it harder for crops to absorb applied nutrients. Resurge from Helena is a low-dust granule that delivers humic compounds to improve nutrient uptake and plant growth. The Resurge granule's superior hardness and uniformity withstands pneumatic applications, allowing for even distribution in your fertilizer and across the acre. Energize your soil and elevate your crops. Contact your Helena representative to learn more. Always follow label instructions and check registration status before use.
I'm Lindsay Smith with RealAg Radio, and joining me now is Kris Kinnaird. He's the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Farmers Edge. Welcome here, Kris.
Hi, Lindsay. Thanks for having me.
All right. So Farmers Edge, we're going to talk a bit about lab services, some soil testing, a lot of things to cover. But let's start first with the Farmers Edge name and the brand. What does it mean to see those trucks in the field, to see those trucks on the road?
Yeah, definitely. Farmers Edge has been evolving the last few years. Our focus is all about supporting ag retailers and those that serve farmers directly. So we aim to be an enabler both from the tech perspective and the lab perspective from behind the scenes. And really the one big change there is the expansion of our soil lab services, really opening the door to ag retailers, independent agronomists, making it easier for them to access fast, reliable soil testing. So whether it's precision agronomy, lab analysis, we have some in-season decision support tools as well. Our goal is really to help retailers deliver real value to their customers.
So now, and this is, as you mentioned, I mean, the brand known for the technological advancements, known for being a leader. This really does bring in the lab services, the analysis, brings in another layer, really, to the service offering from Farmers Edge.
Yeah, absolutely. We focus on speed and accuracy at the lab. The lab in Canada, we had a turnaround time of under 36 hours in 2024. And in the US, we were under 50 hours. So the labs work extremely efficient. And of course, getting the results back for an agronomist, especially in the fall or in the spring, it's important, right? And throughout that, we've got automated systems for faster turnaround time, but what we feel sets us apart is also our integrations. So, we do have what we call Lab Command, our online portal, but we've built API connections with existing software that retailers and independent agronomy companies use to bring the results easier back into their own systems. So we look at the lab as not only a great resource for data and information to drive the decisions in the field, but also making it easy for our customers to access that critical data in any way, shape, or form, whether it's something that we provide from a platform perspective or it's connecting to what they already have. And, of course, collecting the soil can be a task that takes some time, and doing so efficiently and getting to the same spot year after year is also important. In Farmers Edge, we developed an app called FE Soils, which is a do-it-yourself grid sampling app for those in the US that complements some of the other portals that we already have. So streamlining that soil sampling, testing process to make it easy to collect, submit, and then ultimately receive the analysis results.
Right. And all about those data-driven solutions and making those informed decisions. Now, you mentioned, of course, soil testing. It's a critical role in making those database decisions. What's one thing you wish that more ag retailers knew about working with Farmers Edge Labs?
Yeah, absolutely. We position ourselves as more than just a lab. We are a partner. Our goal isn't to just process samples. We want to help retailers grow their business by providing that fast, reliable results and driving those better agronomic decisions, whether it be economically for their business or making technology advancements as well. We want to be there to help. And the ease of use definitely matters. And that's why we were so conscious in developing some of the API integrations to our Lab Command portal, but really making it easy to, remove any extra headaches that there might be. So speed and service, we feel, sets us apart. And in today's market, turnaround times are extremely important. So we want to make sure that that's top of mind when thinking about Farmer's Edge as a lab. We're a partner in the business of agronomy.
Now, you did mention, of course, presence in the U.S., presence in Canada.
Right.
Where can interested either retailers or independent agronomists, where can they go to find more information about Farmer's Edge and Farmer's Edge Labs?
Absolutely. So we have our website, which is www.farmersedgelabs.com. And on that website, there's a link to both the Canadian site, which focuses on our packages in Canada, and then the U.S. site, which focuses on our packages in the U.S. If you go there, you can request a quote or more information about our lab. And for those that do so, are getting their name entered in to a draw to receive lunch paid for their retail or independent agronomy location. So we're running that as a promotion now. And we look forward to hearing those that are interested in.
I do like a good lunch. There you go.
That's right.
Okay.
Who doesn't?
That's right. Very important. Okay, Kris, thank you so much for joining me here on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay.
All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Growing corn? With Envita, you can cut your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain nitrogen and increase yield. Envita takes nitrogen from the air and turns it into nitrogen for your corn. It provides a right place, right time source of nitrogen to maximize your yield. Farmers who use Envita see healthier plants, bigger cobs, and less tipback. Envita is guaranteed to add more bushels to every treated acre. Start growing with Envita. Visit azotic.com to learn more. That's azotic.com.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Tuesday. Hey, delivering reliable agricultural lab testing for your crops, soil, feed, water, and seed. SGS is uniquely positioned, ready to elevate your business in Canada and the United States. Call us now at 1-800-952-5407. That's 1-800-952-5407, and that is SGS. Okay, we're now going to talk about something quite controversial. Well, I think I don't know if it's controversial, but I'll tell you, a lot of times the audience does, and that is looking at tires versus tracks. It's not, the most controversial things aren't religion. The most controversial things aren't politics. It's tires versus tracks. Let's hear Kelvin Hepner reporting from Crop Connect.
Real Agriculture, I'm Kelvin Hepner at the Crop Connect conference in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and joined now by Scott Shearer, professor and chair at The Ohio State University, fresh off his presentation talking about compaction and the latest on compaction research, the impact on yield. Scott, when it comes to tires versus tracks, it's always a big question, a popular question. What are the kind of maybe the top three scenarios where you see potential or value in potentially switching from tires to tracks?
So what we know from field investigations that we've done, there's two things that farmers really need to be thinking about when they ask themselves a question about tires versus tracks. Obviously, there is an adder when you go to tracks. If you're buying a new machine and you can buy a wheeled version of it or a track version of it, there's going to be that price differential. And so the farmer has to look at that price differential and ask themselves, is that something that's of value to me? The two areas that I encourage them to think about is productivity. In other words, how many acres per hour they're going to cover with the machine. That really depends upon the tillage operation. The second one then is fuel use rate for that machine. And what we're finding is the track machines generally, we have greater productivity. There's less slip, if you want to think of it that way. We don't eliminate slip, but there's less slip. And then we actually see probably a 10 to 15% reduction in fuel cost associated with that. And those are really the two big takeaway messages as far as tracks versus tires and their value. The other thing is, and we've done some studies with tracks on grain carts versus wheels on grain carts, and in both cases, under unfavorable soil conditions, we'll see a yield loss the following year by trafficking with a loaded grain cart. We see less of an impact with track machines than we do with wheeled machines. So there is a potential there in terms of a yield impact from tracks on a machine. Again, it's all depends upon the soil conditions at harvest. Another area we're seeing a lot of value in tracks is on central fill planters. And what we usually talk about is the pinch rows, and those are the essentially rows that go underneath the wheels on the central part of the central fill planter. And what we're seeing there is 5, 6, 7 acre yield improvement by going to tracks. Okay, and we've done it for a couple of years. I'd like to say that they're going to get that every year, but it really depends upon, again, the soil conditions in some respects.
So grain carts and those central fill planters, both applications that you see potential value in.
Yeah, and then we go back to the tractor, and again, what's the difference on the adder? But again, what's going to drive that in some respects is going to be that productivity or acres per hour, and then also the fuel use rates. Okay. So those are my recommendations to get farmers thinking about. On the one side, it's kind of we're looking at the soil response and what the reduction in compaction might mean. It'd be a fallacy, though, for me to tell you that tracks eliminate compaction. Okay. Gross vehicle weight drives compaction. I don't care how you spread it out. It's just that we lessen the influence, if you will, gross vehicle weight when we do go to track machines.
Okay. Going back to your findings on central fill planters and those pinch rows, what's the hypothesis on why we might be seeing increased yield in those rows?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on. First of all, in our observations are whether you're wheeled or tracks, if you're moving a lot of soil at planting time, there's probably going to be a negative yield impact. We have had years when the soil's been relatively dry that we see a positive impact from the tracks. What I'm saying is we get yields above what the wing rows are. And our theory there is we might have consolidated the soil and gotten better seed-soil contact where those tracks are running close to the rows where they were the seed was put in the ground. But again, you got to be careful, but we've seen pretty consistently a yield advantage for tracks on a central fill planter versus wheels on a central fill planter.
All right. Thanks for your time today, Scott.
Thank you very much.
That was Kelvin Hepner of Real Agriculture reporting from Crop Connect that happened in mid-February in Winnipeg, Manitoba. He was talking to Scott Shearer from Ohio State University, of course, the national football champion, Ohio State University as well. You know, hey, listen, there's some data attached. It's not just a qualitative discussion in terms of tracks versus tires. I know many of you out there are very passionate about this topic. We'd love to hear from you. What did you hear from Scott that you agree with, that you've seen on your own farm? And maybe have you seen different results than he talked about from your own experiences? What are your thoughts on tracks versus tires, whether it's on the tractor or some of the implements? The grain cart, for example, the air cart is another one that he had mentioned. We'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Hey, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to get an update from Tom Wolf of Agrimetrix. We're going to talk about the update on drone spraying. How close are we to this being a reality in a country like Canada? But first, I want to tell you about Super U. Don't put your yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koga Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
It is hard to believe that next week is March. March it just feels like we just had Christmas and New Year's and we're already into March. Well, what it means when we get into March is March 4th through the 6th in Edmonton is the Canadian Crops Convention. This year's theme is Navigating Our Future and includes a fantastic lineup of knowledgeable speakers and great networking opportunities. I'm going to be there myself, looking forward to it. Check out what the Canola Council of Canada and the Canada Grains Council have planned, and you can register by going to canadiancrops.ca. Looking forward to hearing what former Prime Minister Stephen Harper has to say at that meeting. He is going to be one of the keynote speakers, probably the keynote speaker. There's a great agenda. I'm going to be hosting a panel talking about some trade and political issues. I'm looking forward to that with both Canadian, Mexican, and U.S. representatives on that panel, so that's pretty bloody timely. Looking forward to the Canada Crops Convention indeed coming up next week. Going to be a Commodity Classic. It starts on Sunday as well, so this is a busy, busy week. And this is one of those weeks where there really is no week. It just sort of rolls all together. And it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of great content to be posted at RealAgriculture.com and, of course, on this radio show. Okay, now we're going to get an update from Tom Wolf. This, again, is Kelvin Hepner reporting from Crop Connect in Winnipeg, Manitoba. He talked to Tom Wolf of Agrimetrix. Tom gave an update on where are we at exactly with drone spraying.
Kelvin Hepner for Real Agriculture at Crop Connect in Winnipeg, and joined by Tom Wolf of Agrimetrix and Sprayers 101. Tom, when it comes to drone spraying in Canada, where are we at in terms of the policy environment around the legality and allowing of drones to be used for herbicide application in crop?
As far as today, February 2025, there are still no agricultural pesticides registered for drone use in Canada. We have had in the fall registration of triclopyr, which is a herbicide made by Corteva for the removal of woody perennials in rangeland and pastures and rights-of-way, and that has received a drone label. But there are no other agricultural uses other than fertilizers and seed.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any uses in terms of insecticides? I know there's some application there when it comes to mosquitoes, potentially, that type of thing.
That's right. Possibly for
agricultural.
For municipalities, perhaps it might be. But there are BT products that would be larvicides for mosquito control.
Okay. So, what do you see as the next phase in terms of moving this ahead if drone spraying is to be allowed in Canada? What will that take?
Well, the PMRA is currently basically responding to registrants' requests to put a drone use on their label, and then in return the PMRA would request a few data sets from these registrants. They would include drift data, they would include efficacy data, does it work as well as, what would the rate structure be? It would be operator bystander exposure data, is there a risk? And also MRLs, maximum residue limits. Does the low water volume and the small droplet size used by drones affect how herbicides or other pesticides are retained by the food crop, and is that going to impact our export markets?
Okay. So that process is underway in terms of the applicants working on having those label changes made. Are they running into issues there, or where is the holdup in terms of, is this potentially something that we can expect on the horizon in the near future, or is this more of a longer term thing?
The holdup is really that it's driven by the registrant's desire to have their products on a label, and they're not really lining up to take those steps. And it's also a bit of a long process, so they do have to prepare all the data that I just outlined, probably many other data points that I'm not aware of, and they have to make a submission to the PMRA, and the PMRA takes 16 months to approve a submission like that. So, for example, there was a submission for an agricultural fungicide made this fall, and it will be 16 months, it will be 2026 before we see that product available in Canada. There will be probably other products like Garlon XRT, that is triclopyr by Corteva, that may follow suit for that same market, the non-agricultural market, but a very useful market for, rights away, like hydro rights away in the far north, that kind of a thing.
What do we know about drone application in terms of the understanding of how the droplets disperse in the field and that type of thing? That research, of course, I'm assuming there's been a ton of research happening around that the last number of years. Am I assuming wrong?
There's an increasing body of work that documents, what kind of quality job a drone can do. Certainly there's all kinds of anecdotal reports from users of drones and sellers of drones that they work equivalently, and we don't have a lot of data to prove that they don't. But what we have got is a lot of patternation data. So the problem with, I guess not the problem, but the issue, I guess, with any aerial application is that you don't really know what your swath width is, because it's not driven by a boom width. So a 120-foot boom is going to lay down a 120-foot swath. A drone or an aircraft of any sort relies on redistribution of the spray it emits from a boom or a single atomizer, or rotary set of rotary atomizers, and it distributes itself in the downwash, and it widens out to certain degrees. And how far it widens out depends on a lot of factors like flying height, flying speed, droplet size, water volume, canopy structure, wind conditions. All of those affect the swath width and its uniformity. And so it's a little bit more difficult to just simply say, yeah, that's the swath width, or you're good to go. You do have to do a lot of testing. And the downside of not doing the testing is really that you might have striping in your field.
So are we gaining an understanding there? Is that learning happening right now in the field?
It's happening. So we're certainly doing some of it in our company. And we're working, obviously, with my partner, Jason DeVoe, in acquiring some data. And there's other partners doing it. I know that Corteva, in pursuing some of their industrial registrations, are doing similar work. And so we are learning a lot. What we're finding is that the swath width is in fact as variable as we suspect it is. It's not really a straight line down the field. If you fly straight, your edge of your swath isn't exactly as straight because little gusts of wind can displace it so easily. I find that to be a bit of a problem. We also see a kind of a lack of uniformity. Like, we're finding that there are some really high peaks and really low valleys in this distribution, unlike, I mean, it's not completely unlike other application methods, but it's a little worse, I would say, than the other application methods. And so we have to figure out, is that acceptable? How can we mitigate that? And, you asked the question of what are we doing on the development of maybe new drone technologies. I think we're actually at the beginning of this whole story.
Still in the early stages of developing that.
Yeah, we've really got a situation where drones were, deployed in Asia primarily to relieve people walking through rice paddies with knapsack sprayers. Most pesticides that are allowed to be used with knapsack sprayers in Asia are immediately allowed to be used by drone. What they're trying to do is get people out of these situations where they have high exposure, high risk to the individual. The drone for them is a big improvement. So those are the drones that we're seeing in North America, and they're showing to be, as I said, a little bit less uniform than we would like them to be. So I see the need for continued evolution in the design of the drones. The concept is sound, but I would say it's a little too early to be too enthusiastic about them, because it's a little bit less than ideal.
Final question on this topic then, Tom. It's kind of hard to have a conversation these days without getting into geopolitics, and we have a lot of these drones, as you mentioned, coming from Asia, from China specifically. Do you see potential geopolitical factors slowing down the adoption or advancement of drone spray application in North America on the horizon if, say, the U.S. administration bans drones from China?
Yeah, and as we know, there is a bill in front of the House that, or Congress, I guess. The House has already passed it, but the Senate has not yet passed that bill, as far as I know, that would severely constrain the import of Chinese-made drones. And it's possible that would also be a constraint to Canada, because when we put a tariff on electric cars from China, or we did that a week after America did that, so we followed in lockstep. There are some new companies that are using, I guess, Western or NATO or OECD supply lines that would not be affected by a ban from China specifically. But we've also seen, with any kind of restriction on imports, we've seen people be able to sidestep that and just put their supply chain into other offshore places that make a similar product that are not affected. And so we'd have to chase that. Hard to predict that, actually. Okay.
I guess just at least in the short term, there could potentially be a cost factor that would slow down purchases potentially.
Absolutely, yeah. But the drones are remarkably affordable.
Exactly.
You know, and on a, you know, let's say a T50, a DJI T50 can do 20 to 30 acres per hour, and you can buy them for less than $40,000. That's a tremendous amount of acres per purchase dollar compared to, say, a ground sprayer, which costs probably 10 times or more as much for this equivalent capability. So there is actually some room to move. They could be more expensive, and it probably wouldn't hurt their sales that much.
Yeah. That is, I think, that's of course what's driving a lot of the excitement about the potential for drones as an application model or system.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of people say, you know what, I'm going to try these. Compared to my ground sprayer, they're relatively affordable. And if they don't work out, I haven't, sunk a whole lot of money into it, and I'm going to do a lot of learning, and maybe I can sell them to someone else after, so I'm not that committed to it. There's a lot of exploring going on right now. And of course, the unfortunate thing is it's all kind of done under the radar, right? I mean, it is still illegal to spray agricultural pesticides by drone. And because it's illegal, then there's also a reluctance to be licensed to fly that drone and to register your drone with Transport Canada or to get the SFOC required to, apply pesticides, because that would expose you. And that basically means we might be, playing with fire a little bit on the risk side. Are qualified pilots flying these heavy drones? Are they flying them in a safe manner? Are they sharing airspace with an agricultural aircraft during spraying season? Very likely. I'm a little bit worried about the safety of all that, to be honest.
And so far, at least publicly, I don't know whether we've had incidences that are publicly known, but like you're saying, there's potential for some risk like that.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there was one big one that happened last month in California with a camera drone hitting the wing of a water bomber from Quebec. And luckily that was a small drone, probably, one of those little camera drones. These drones are 100 kilos, and they're going to get bigger. They're not going to get smaller. And so they are a very serious object. Not just in the air, but also on the ground, spinning their rotors.
Well, we'll continue following where this goes. Thanks for your time today, Tom.
That was Tom Wolf of Agrimetrix talking to Real Agriculture's Kelvin Hepner about where's the future going here with drone spraying. I'm curious as well on your thoughts. I always get a bunch of mixed reactions here. I hear from some of the audience that is all in on the potential of spraying with the drone. Minimization of compaction, not having to have necessarily an operator. There's the capital investment side of it. But some of you also show some caution in terms of can we get the right amount of coverage and the right application? Can we do a good job with the application of some of these products? And at the end there of the discussion, they were talking about some of the geopolitical factors on could the U.S. show like a restriction on drones coming from China as we're about to potentially see a heating up of that trading relationship. Lots of things to consider in this topic. It's almost like we covered tires and treads, and if that's number A in terms of controversial things amongst farmers, maybe the number B from a machinery standpoint would be drone spraying in the future of it. So send me your feedback, shaney@realagriculture.com. More opinions, very, very welcome on that one indeed. Hey, tomorrow on the show, I'm not going to be here. Kelvin Hepner and Lindsay Smith will be hosting, and they're going to be hosting from the CFA, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture meeting in Ottawa. The CFA meeting is in Ottawa, and it's brought to you by the Cooperators, great insurance company, and the Cooperators and CFA partnering with RealAg Radio to do a live recording of the show from the stage tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Of course, we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast episode brought to you by Authority Strike Herbicide from FMC. Tackle tough weeds like kochia, cleavers, Russian thistle, and pigweed with the dual power of 2 Group 14 modes of action. Visit your local retailer today or visit ag.fmc.com/ca to find out more.
Hey, welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's the bonus edition. This is the segment 6, as we call it, on the inside of Real Agriculture. Thanks a lot for downloading the RealAg Radio podcast. I really do mean it. Thank you so much. Our audience continues to grow, and you, the podcast listener, are a big part of it. And like I always say at the beginning, share, tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, your enemies. I really don't care. The more the merrier. Bring them all in and mention RealAg Radio, as far as that's one of the places where you get your ag information for Canada and the U.S. Jam-packed today. It was kind of like a quasi-agronomic Tuesday, I guess I'll put it to you that way. Make sure you tune into tomorrow's show. Lindsay Smith and Kelvin Hepner from the CFA meeting in Ottawa. That's going to be a lot of fun, talking about risk, and I think you're going to very much enjoy that one. I'm kind of jelly. I'm not going to be there, as my daughter would say, jelly. But I know they're going to have a good time. Indeed. And a little bit of controversy at the back end of the show there. We talked about tracks versus tires. We talked about spray drones. Those are some topics that come up a lot. You could call those maybe some clickbaity kind of topics for farmers, but I do want your perspectives on those. Indeed. Now, I did collect some top ag news stories of the day. We should probably run through those and talk about them. So if we look at the top ag news stories of the day today, leading off, we have, a vocal advocate for Canadian agriculture in the federal Liberal caucus has been appointed as the Parliamentary Secretary for Agriculture and Rural Economic Development by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So Cody Blois, who was first elected in the Nova Scotia riding of Kings Hants in 2019 and has served as chair of the House of Commons and Agriculture Committee since 2021, takes over the parliamentary secretary post from Francis Drouin, who has announced he is not rerunning in the upcoming federal election. So officially, Blois becomes parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food and parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Rural Economic Development and minister responsible for the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, as part of a shuffle involving 19 different parliamentary secretary roles announced on Friday afternoon. So Cody Blois, frequent guest on RealAg Radio. I did see him in person there, would be back mid-January at the, where were we? We were in Nova Scotia. We were in Greenwich, Nova Scotia for the Scotia Horticultural Congress. So I ran to Cody there. So, congratulations to him. And of course, he is supporting Mark Carney in the Liberal leadership race. U.S. President Donald Trump said he intends to move ahead with punishing tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports in the coming days, despite efforts to persuade the administration to back off on trade measures that would hurt the integrated North American economy. At a White House news conference Monday with French President Macron, Mr. Trump showed no sign he is withdrawing his threat to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods in early March. He said, "We are on time with the tariffs, and it seems like that is moving along very rapidly." And then when asked he was going to impose the tariffs next week, he said, "We have been treated very badly, and it's not just Canada and Mexico. We have been taken advantage of." Mr. Trump said the tariffs are going forward on time and on schedule. Related to the tariffs, story of the Globe and Mail, Canada's growth at risk amid trade war fears. Economists are lowering their forecast for Canada's economic growth, citing concerns over potential trade battle with the U.S. A tariff war between two countries could shrink Canadian output by nearly 3% over 2 years, effectively erasing growth during that period. Additionally, it could reduce long-term potential by 2.5% as businesses scale back investment. I was sharing with Kelvin, I was texting him earlier, I said, I've had two conversations today, two different business owners, both from Alberta. One person saying, as a result of these Trump tariff threats, really, and also I would say in that case a little bit tied to the fact that Mark Carney may actually win the election. We could have another Liberal government. He had made the comment that need to pack up and maybe I need to move my business to the U.S. I can't do this anymore. I had somebody else tell me, more so related to the Trump tariffs, that looking at substantial business investments in the U.S. was really getting tired of being treated terribly by President Trump and was considering selling his U.S. assets, quite considerable U.S. assets, I might add, and maybe relocating some of that head office there to somewhere like the Caribbean as an example. So everybody's kind of looking at this in different ways, and how it all takes shape and takes form, I think really undetermined, but I think there's a lot of concern about business investment in Canada, as there's been stories in Reuters and in the Globe as they talk about. Another story that is in the Globe and Mail says how Trump's tariff threats are poisoning the investment climate in Canada. So that's even, I think, a little bit more, even harsher words being used. Meanwhile, now this is interesting because, Kelvin and I were chatting about this. There's a lot of press right now about how Mexico is working on a deal with the U.S. What we don't hear a lot about is that Canada is working on a deal with the U.S. Now, I have full confidence. I would expect that Canada is doing the same as Mexico. I wouldn't expect that Mexico's wheeling and dealing and Canada is not. Now, publicly, though, I'm not sure if it's the U.S. government that's talking about how they're doing a deal with Mexico, or if it's the Mexican government trying to show that they're doing a deal with the U.S. But on Canada, it's a little quieter. And it may be more of the Canadian culture, personality. Like right this week, happening today, the NASDA meeting is taking place, which is, ag secretaries from across the U.S. getting together, and there's a Canadian contingent. Saskatchewan Ag Minister Harrison is in attendance. Federal Ag Minister Lawrence McCauley is in attendance. A whole bunch of different ag representatives are at this NASDA meeting to talk about the benefits of trade between Canada and the U.S. So Canada's doing things on the avocation side, but we're not hearing. But even those farm groups. And maybe some of you that are in those farm groups can answer this question for me. Why is there not more singing from the tower tops in terms of, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's how we're advocating for the industry. Everybody's kind of quiet about it. That again, maybe a Canadian cultural thing, not exactly sure. I know if it was reversed, this is, again, a bit of an assumption. If it was reversed, we would hear like U.S. farm groups really broadcast and talk about the things and who they are meeting with and why, and a lot more boisterous in terms of their communication on some of the work that is happening behind the scenes, not so much from a Canadian perspective. And maybe that is a culture thing. Not being critical, I'm just that there is a difference there for sure. It was back to Mexico. So Mexico's Sheinbaum pushes for USMCA deal as tariff deadline nears. The Mexican president reaffirmed her commitment to securing a deal with the U.S. to prevent the imposition of 25% tariffs on Mexican exports set to take effect on March 4th. That's next week. She emphasized Mexico's dedication to addressing the U.S. fentanyl crisis and maintaining strong trade relations under the USMCA. Sheinbaum also noted that Mexico is considering additional tariffs on imports from countries without free trade agreements, particularly China. If Mexico imposes tariffs on Chinese imports, the direct impact will be limited, as Mexico accounts for only about 2.4% of China's total export, according to Bloomberg. Economy Minister Marcelo Ebrard remains in Washington for negotiations as Sheinbaum expresses willingness to speak directly with President Trump if necessary. This is something I heard about in that Bloomberg story, where the U.S. is pushing Mexico to look at tariffs on China to prevent that kind of nearshoring that the U.S. has been very critical of. I'm curious, though, if that gets them away from anything, because the reality is, look what happened to Canada. Canada played ball, put the 100% tariff on Chinese-produced EVs, and look what it got them. It put them. They're still like lock in the bullseye. And what did it get Canada? Well, it got China retaliating against Canadian canola. So I'm curious if Mexico learns from that, or if they're aware of that. I'm sure they're aware of it, but how much does it factor into their decision making on this? USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins addresses avian flu in Texas. She, on Monday, met with poultry farmers and industry leaders in Texas to address the ongoing avian flu crisis. She toured Cal-Maine Foods facility in Bogota before hosting a roundtable in Mount Pleasant, where discussions focused on outbreak response and mitigation strategies. Supposedly, she is going to be rolling out new details this week on how the U.S. is going to shift in its approach to dealing with HPAI and dealing with some of the egg price crisis. I saw that a dozen eggs in New York is now like $8 or $7.50. Very, very expensive. Other news, from a South American standpoint, rains are a turning point for Argentine crops. Recent heavy rainfall across much of Argentina's heartland is likely to continue over the next few days and mark an unturning point for soybean and corn crops, the Reserve Grain Exchange said. More than 100 millimeters, that's about 3.9 inches of rain soaked farmland over the last few days, providing relief from drought conditions. The exchange didn't issue new production forecasts, which it previously pegged at 47.5 million metric tons for soybeans and 46 million metric tons for corn. Story in The Economist talking about salmon farming. And it talks about how fish farming is the fastest growing form of food production in the world. Seafood accounts for around 70% of the world's protein intake. In some parts of Asia and Africa, the number is near to 50%. The OECD, a rich country club, reckons that thanks to population growth and rising incomes, global consumption of fish will reach 180 million tons by the end of the decade, up from 158 million tons in 2020. But the ocean has only so much to give. The World Bank reckons that 90% of the world's fisheries are being fished either at or over their capacity. Aquaculture has therefore accounted for nearly all the growth in fish consumption since 1990. It will have to account for almost all the growth to come in the future. As with farming on land, though, aquaculture can cause environmental damage, according to The Economist. Many farm fish are grown in net pens, either in rivers or in the open ocean. Uneaten food and fish waste can pollute the surrounding waters. When net pens break, escaped fish can damage the local ecosystem. Inland flow-through farms require continuous streams of fresh water from rivers or wells, competing with those who might wish to drink it instead. Rearing lots of fish in close proximity risks outbreaks of disease and parasites, which sweep in from the open water. That requires antibiotics and other drugs to keep the fish healthy. I'm not going to read the rest of the story, but The Economist kind of being a little bit critical of fish farms in this regard. But obviously, the consumer's speaking, and we do see, like, you go to some restaurants, and it's like, it's non-fish, non-farm fish, as an example. And in some grocery stores and stuff like that. But obviously, the consumer is trying to increase their protein intake, and especially with salmon as an example, is obviously a really, really popular option. And we're having trouble finding it from a wild standpoint. And so fish farms are. And listen, technological advancements, and trying to deal with some of the barriers or challenges that farm fish present, definitely seems like there is a relatively bright future for aquaculture. A lot of times from an agriculture perspective, aquaculture, I know people in aquaculture get a little bit defensive because they're left out of the discussion, but aquaculture definitely an important industry in a country like Canada and the U.S. indeed. So that story was from The Economist, so I encourage you to check that out. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. That's it for the top ag news stories of the day, and that's it for the bonus segment here on Real Ag Radio, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.